being here so much from our CAF Mission 43 family. Please welcome to the stage, Scotty Smiley. Scotty, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Yeah,
thanks, Julie.
Well,
seats.
Welcome to the wonderful state of Idaho, the 43rd state, and the namesake of Mission 43.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
Are you a permanent refugee from the state of Washington, or?
I am. I actually lived here. Unfortunately, I was forced to move. My family didn't live in a Democrat society. We did what my parents told us to do, but did my grade school at McMillan Elementary. So
yeah,
go.
Just McMillan, or did you go to Lowell Scott and Centennial as well?
I didn't make it that far. I had to give up Boise in 5th grade and moved on to Pasco, Washington. So,
but you're still a native Idahoan.
You better believe it. I love it. Love Coeur d'Alene. Go there every summer, multiple times. My older brother lives there now. But more importantly, I love coming back to the City of Trees, Boise.
Awesome, man. So let's just go down the list here. You're the first blind officer ever to serve in the active duty United States Army. You're a published author and motivational speaker. You work full-time as a banking advisor for a Wall Street company. You're a husband and father of 3 boys. You've surfed, skydived, completed Ironman triathlons, and climbed Mount Denali. And you're completely blind. Tonight's full of hard questions. Number 1, are you faking it?
I take my eyes out, but my hands are dirty.
Well, there's children here too, so.
Thank you. I always thought it would be a good Halloween gag, but my wife hasn't approved yet.
That's true, and we know she's the real boss, and by the way, but we're gonna hit this later, but you're not the only exceptional overachieving person in the Smiley household.
No, I'm married to an amazing woman.
Yes, you are, and she's actually running for U.S. Senate in the state of Washington.
Yep. My biggest hero is Tiffany Smiley, her support, her love, not only for me, but our 3 boys. Again, she wishes she could be here. Our older one is a little sick, under the weather, but it's that, putting family first is what she always does. So I love her to death, and I look forward to being the eye candy of a new United States Senator.
Opinions differ, Scotty, but...
Oh, she'll be United States Senator, trust me.
Oh, yeah. Yep, I believe that. The reason why you're here, man, like the catalyst for your story started, at least I think, in 2005. So let's go back to the spring of 2005. You're a young lieutenant, fresh out of West Point. Were you second lieutenant or first lieutenant?
I was first lieutenant at the time.
Okay, so not completely young, but was that your first deployment?
First and only deployment, 6 months.
So you're 6 months into your first and only deployment. You're in northern Iraq, specifically in Mosul, correct?
Yep.
And this experience happens to you. But before that, I'm just curious, like as a young lieutenant out of West Point, you're deployed, objectively to a controversial war. Like, were you a true believer in the cause at that time?
I think, in all honesty, it was less a true cause. It was me doing what I was told to do by my command. I was ordered, given orders to deploy to Mosul, Iraq. So, newly married to my high school sweetheart, I had to kiss her goodbye and say, hey, this is what I have to do. So I was less introspective on whether it was a war we had to go, we should have gone. I think that's, Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yeah.
But for me, I was doing what I was called to do. We all wore a flag on our right shoulders, all 50 stars, and I was doing what I believe to be fighting for my country overseas.
So you're there for 6 months. What was the deployment like for you?
It was hard. Every day, new experiences, new fears, new anxieties, but what we always relied on was each other. I remember one of my first missions was in Talifar. It was to go up to Sinjar mountain range and resupply a transmission location. And just going outside for the first time into a country which, we had we had M4 rifles, none of the blank red firing adapters on the front. We had real rounds. It was insane in the back of my mind that we controlled this country, but more so was the fear of the enemy who was out there. Everyone's in civilian guard, but each day you realize to trust in each other, trust in your protocols, your primary, secondary avenues of approach, but every day it brought something new, whether it's improvised explosive devices, which are bombs in the road, on people, in cars, driving towards you, stationary and garbage, rocket propelled grenades, AK-47s. Everything brought something new. In the back of my mind, all that we were truly trying to do was to get rid of an evil regime and now build a democratic state to where then we could leave it. But in that process, insurgents were constantly attacking, constantly going against what we, not only the United States, but the international forces were trying to put forward.
Tough war, tough deployment for 6 months. And during that time, I guess, well, you had your birthday. How old were you when you had your birthday on 28 March 2005?
I turned a big 25 years old on March 28th of 2005, born in 1980. It's kind of sad to say, no one sung me happy birthday.
That's
no
weird.
birthday cake, no candles. But for me, who I missed the most was my wife. We had been married over a year. Our anniversary's in December. Luckily enough, was able to call her on my anniversary. And that's what I missed the most, was my wife, the woman I was and still in love with. And I think that's what was hard, was just missing the family. Because a lot of the insurgents and experiences that we had every day, whether it was a shooting, an ambush we went through, or an ambush we set up, the families back home never understood what we were going through. It was always a surprise. And whether it made the news the next day, weeks there later, or if someone was injured or someone was killed in action, the families find out days later, while we, meanwhile, are just living in it. So, but yeah, it probably wasn't the best birthday I ever had.
And only a few days after that, something truly life-changing happened to you. Take us to that day in April.
Yeah, on April 6th of 2005, the day prior, on April 5th, we were a quick reaction force, and we actually had to respond to a suicide bomber a vehicle hit the back of a Stryker vehicle, which Stryker vehicles are 8-wheeled vehicles, has like a 50 caliber machine gun on top. But in that attack, one of United States members in my company was very seriously injured, where metal went through his head, knocked unconscious, temporarily paralyzed. So we knew and saw firsthand what these men were willing to do to international forces, literally give their own lives, commit suicide to try to kill as many American forces as possible. So when I woke up that morning, it was a little late call, which you always enjoy, but it was late night, saw intelligence and said, hey, potential suicide car bombs. And at first I was mad, because I was like, this lazy intel doesn't even want to change the intel.
From what happened yesterday?
Yeah. Well, I looked at the top. You gotta be careful with what you say, but I looked at the top, and it was April 6, 2005, today's date, and understood the severity and the situation. And so as my platoon, we only had 3 vehicles, because we had staged one of our squads, which was about a 12-man unit overlooking a traffic circle that we were regularly hit at, went out and then went into the city. My company commander at the time was out there, and at the time he said, hey, we have intelligence, on-time intelligence, that insurgents are potentially setting something up on a supply route. So supply routes, sorry, I got to speak English, are roads. So it's basically the highway. So they're telling people to stay off this highway, so don't go on that highway. Go on the suburban roads, back streets, and see if you can kind of check out what's going on. I was like, Roger. So it's all over the radio. He's on the ground. And so as I'm traveling, and I was the first vehicle in my formation, 2 vehicles behind me, and as I'm traveling north, again, the roads are pretty crowded. Homes are very close to the sidewalks. But then right across the street is a market. And our markets there were kind of like the buffet we have. Everything's open. There's no stores. There's just shops with shopping carts. People are walking around. But there's a single vehicle. It was a silver Opel. The back of the car was lower to the ground than the front. Again, giving it suspiciousness, but there wasn't a lot of other vehicles, which was unusual. And that kind of goes back to the intelligence that we had received, that they had told other men were on the ground, insurgents telling the people to get out. Because, again, the insurgents didn't want to hurt the Iraqi people. They wanted the Iraqi people to be on their side and basically create a barrier, a crevasse between the international forces and the Iraqi people. And so me seeing this is unusual, I made a decision at the time, given the rules of engagement, and fortunately or unfortunately, the rules of engagement stated you couldn't just shoot someone, you couldn't harm someone unless you saw visually that they had a weapon. that they had hurt someone and they still had the weapon. And so for me, I didn't know if he had a weapon. He was just in a vehicle. Of course, the back of the car was lower to the ground, which meant he had something heavy in the back. And again, and many of you don't know, heavy in the back, many times these suicide car bombs have what they're called like a mortar round, but it's a massive mortar round, like from a howitzer. They take the caps off and they put a blasting cap in the middle. Well, these things weigh about 20 pounds apiece. Well, they'll go push 20 of them in the back of a car, so it's like 400 pounds, which weighs the car down. Me not knowing that, me not seeing that, I pulled my striker vehicle about 30 yards away from his vehicle. So he's facing west on this road. I'm facing east. It's cement road, no median, nothing in between us. He's probably about at my 9 o'clock, or probably my 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Again, this just looked like an innocent man. His head was buzzed. His face was buzzed, probably a little less thick than my beard. Gray shirt down to his wrist, just looked like an innocent guy. But again, the suspiciousness of it, and the awkwardness and the intelligence we had, I knew something was wrong. So I yelled at him to get out of his vehicle. And he looked kind of over his shoulder at me, because we're kind of cattywampus to each other. I'm kind of angled. He looked over his shoulder and he raised his hands off the steering wheel and shook his head no. And that's when he let his foot off the brake. I fired a round in front of his vehicle, boom, and then he stopped. He put his hands back on the steering wheel, took them off again, shook his head no, let his foot off the brake, and that's when I shot another round, and then boom, my world went black.
What was the last thing you remember smelling or feeling?
It's interesting. It's almost like a dreamlike state for me now, because it's been over 17 years ago. In my life, I've been blind for 17 years. But the last thing I remember seeing is just this innocent man, quote unquote innocent man, in a silver opal, lifting his hands up. But I know at that time, again, it's probably 100 degrees out. I guarantee I was sweating. I had a helmet on, bulletproof glasses, Oakley M frames, bulletproof jacket, rounds around my waist. Had an M4 rifle in my hands, gloves on both hands, a GPS on my right hand, watch on my left hand. My sleeves were rolled up against Army regulation.
Yep.
But I know the smells and the bitterness of that location. But in true fashion, all I truly remember is that man was the last thing that I saw.
As a leader, you had the ability to place yourself as TC or, troop command or whatever, vehicle commander in any position you wanted. Why did you choose to be the lead vehicle in that convoy?
I think for me, as and Dan brings up a good point. As officers, yes, you do lead from the front, but as an infantryman, you usually have a squad in front, and they're kind of your lead force. So more often than not, when we first got there would be a striker out front, first, third, second, whichever we chose. But for some reason, they kept missing the turns. So it's called the FBCB2. I don't even know what that stands for.
Blue Force Tracker.
There you go. Which basically you have a screen inside that the vehicle commander can see, and just like every good internet device, it's just a few minutes slow. So he says, hey, the turn's coming up to the driver. Well, I see their dot bloop, over the lip, and I know where we're right. I go, you missed it. So I take the right. Well, I tell the driver to take a right, and then that vehicle has to do a 15-point U-turn, pull up. Now he's the last vehicle.
Austin Powers.
Yeah, Austin Powers. Thank you. It's Austin Powers. We didn't get quite stuck as Austin did, though. So for me, I realized, again, it's more the importance of mission. So everything is on a time basis. Like if the ambushes or you have to hit the target at 2 a.m., you got to be there at 2 a.m. because there's fire support, there's other units that are there. And if we're out dilly-dackling in the middle of nowhere because we're lost, that wouldn't get my unit in a position of success. So probably the fourth, fifth day, I said, hey, sorry, I'm taking the lead. There's some squabbling from some squad leaders, but I realized I am responsible for everything this platoon does and fails to do. So that's one of the reasons that I took leadership, and I won't say leadership, but the front point. And again, being metal about up to my chest, felt very protected. I never thought that day on April 6th would have been the day that truly changed my life.
Did you have a feeling, like before you deployed, oftentimes guys, men and women both, that are deploying to combat zones like that have kind of a fatalistic instinct of some kind, like something's going to happen to me, I'm going to get hurt, I'm going to die. You never had any of that?
No, I never had that feeling. Like there was always a trust in the men beside me, men and women who survived, the mechanics that repaired our vehicles, our weapons, the men that supported each one of us on right and left. There was never a fear that I was going to get hurt. There's never a fear that anything was going to happen to me. And sometimes it's an unfortunate nature of man is once you get used to a combat zone, and I shared a little bit about my first time out, I was puckered, like I was scared. But once you get used to it, you kind of release that fight or flight. You're not necessarily as aware as you potentially should be. And many times that last 90 days in combat are some of the worst injuries that deployments have, is because they're so lax and because they're thinking about going home. They're thinking about sleeping on a nice bed, me kissing my wife. But I never had a fear of what or how my life would be.
It's really interesting how what human beings are able to adapt to, and I don't think the general public. What are you, blind, Scotty?
Yeah, a little bit.
There you go. Anyway, so
I find things, don't worry.
I know. So this car bomb explodes less than 30 meters away from you. Your basically chest and head and everything are sticking out of this hatch. What physically happens to you? Like, we know metal entered your body. Where? How?
Yeah, so a lot of this is later told to me, because the second that blast went, again, the last thing I remember seeing is a man. And that blast was literally a millisecond, which I didn't see, I didn't remember, I don't recall. But he blew himself up, sending his body, the car, into a trillion different pieces. Metal went through my Oakley M-frame glasses, cut my left eye in half, went into my skull. I still have a piece of metal up here in between my dura mater. It's like the covering of your brain. Metal went right through the middle of my right eye, poked a hole, like again, I'm finding this all out later, right through the middle of my cornea lens, and then poked a hole into my retina. And then I have little pieces of metal in my nose and my cheek, in my neck. But other than that, I'm the good-looking guy you see here today.
Like I said, opinions vary.
Thank you. So with that said, that was the last thing I remember seeing. And again, I'm later told this by when I went back and visited my men in the barracks after they had redeployed, is I was caught up on the hatch. So my bulletproof jacket also was in the back, and it caught, and I was stuck, and they couldn't get me. And they saw not only blood, but cerebral spinal fluid leaking down, and they knew I was hurt. I wasn't responding. My battalion commander saw, I said, one of the biggest explosions. My company commander, who was probably a mile away, thought it was the loudest and biggest blast he had ever heard. My men pulled me down, and I also later found out when I woke up in the hospital, my whole left buttocks and hamstring were deeply, deeply bruised. And what happened is when they pulled me down, my 215 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal went straight down on the back of a metal seat, and just literally, dug in. And I didn't know this, but my men said it. Again, I had a CVC, which is like a audio device, and they couldn't get it off because I always buttoned it so I could hear. And my men took my pocket knife out, cut it off. They put bandages around me. The medical evacuation vehicles was there within 5 minutes. I was sitting on a combat support hospital within no more than 15 minutes after that explosion. And I think truly that's what helped save my life. I was later told I went into cardiac arrest a couple times. They got me some get you going medicine, get my heart keep pumping. I was in shock. And I did have kind of an out-of-body experience in which it was very peaceful, it was very serene, but that I saw myself in the hospital bed, but then men around me, several of my military folks who were able to see me, and then all of a sudden they they get away really fast as doctors come in. And whether that was true or not, it's just kind of the piece that I was in at that time. But unfortunately, the next thing I remember are the most fearful dreams, most fearful nightmares of me being in Iraq, but everything's backwards, everything's flipped upside down, everything's weird. I'm in a vehicle, but I can't get out of the vehicle. I'm like lying in a bed. I'm telling my men to do things. They're not obeying. Then I'm getting mad. I'm yelling. God only knows what I was actually saying in real life.
You remember this from before you woke up?
Yeah. They're dreams that I had.
Yeah.
And then obviously my wife, they're loving me, supporting me. She got a call from one of my best friends, Jeff, my company commander. Again, I would wake her up at the middle of the night. I was able to call her once a week. So she knew it was the uncertainty, but the times that she always looked forward to the random number that called. And it was my boss. And he goes, Tiffany, this is Jeff. He goes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she's like, what? What is it? And he says, Scotty came face to face with a suicide car bomb. And he says, I know one thing he'll probably never be able to see again. And he also said, is like, I don't know if he's going to be alive. I don't know if we can keep him alive. He says, I gave the doctors your phone number, so hopefully they call you in Balad, Iraq, but, I'm so sorry. And that's when my wife's life also blew up into a million pieces. We'd been married for, like I said, a little over a year. Got to spend, I think, good 5 months together. I had to go to Ranger school, so, we military guys got to take our breaks. But, the love of my life, that's when her life changed too. And again, it's the hope, love, and support that she constantly gave me. She made a decision she's going to stop work. She was a registered nurse working at an urgent care clinic, stop work, and then she bought a ticket to fly to D.C. because, the military is kind of a bureaucracy, one would say. Wouldn't get her a ticket because they wanted me to get into D.C. first. And she's like, I am not waiting for my husband.
Well, they don't want to buy her a ticket if they don't know you're going to live to get there yet. Let's
true.
not be unreasonable. Fiscal responsibility is obviously the hallmark of our country's government.
I didn't think that far. I was planning on living, Dan.
Opinions vary.
But what Dan said is true. It's a massive bureaucracy. But again, the hero of my life made a decision. Like, I'm going to be there whether he's there or not. And again, got a call from the doctor in launch stool. Let her know what my signs were. Got a call from my sister, who was actually in Germany at the time. My mom and dad emailed her. They called home. She called home and then went to launch stool Germany, which one of her high school classmates were in the Air Force, got her onto the post, got her into my hospital room, and then was able to hear Tiffany's voice. And at the time, and I didn't say this, the injury hitting the left side of my brain, it paralyzed the right side of my body. So I could not move my arm, my right hand, my right foot. I couldn't move it at all. And so my left hand, Tiffany asked me, or Mary Lynn, my sister, said, squeeze my hand if you can hear her. And Tiffany said, I love you so much, Scotty. And I squeezed her hand super hard. I don't remember it, but it just shows what true love and just kind of why we should do what we're doing is loving each other and being there to support each other. So waking up in Walter Reed Army Medical Center, again, I was the prime of my life, Ranger qualified, airborne, had my paperwork to potentially go to Ranger Assessment Selection Program, which means go to the Ranger Regiment. Those are where the true tough guys are.
Let's not go that far.
You're right, Dan, they're not SF.
Hey!
We know what color SF is, but so for me, I had plans in my life. I had an idea of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. My wife and I were happy. We were in love. We had the future in front of us. And then, boom, I'm waking up in Walter Reed Army Medical Center completely blind, realizing that I can't move the right side of my body, realizing there's no rasp. there's no Ranger Regiment. There's no nothing. Like, there's no reason you should even be alive.
Can I ask you, what emotions were prominent at that point when you first woke up in those first moments?
For me, uncertainty of where I was at. I remember having a dream that I was in D.C., so I was in the back of the White House. I think the South Lawn. I don't know how I got in a limousine in the South Lawn.
Just the Rose Garden, just hanging out?
That's what my dream said.
Okay.
And my wife said she's leaving, and I was probably half in a coma, half not in a coma. And for me, I felt she was leaving me forever. And as she's leaving with the White House in the side, and again, that's where my memories come. But at the same time, when I woke up, truly understanding was like, this isn't me. Someone did a sketch and put me in someone else's body. This isn't my body. I shouldn't be here. Yeah. My body should move. I should have sight. I need to get back to my men. I need to get healthy, get back to redeploy. That was the first thought, was you need to recover. You need to rehabilitate. Get back. Little did I know, you can't really rehabilitate losing your eyes. You can rehabilitate moving, which I successfully did, but that's just where the fragility of my mind was at that time.
Was there anger? Or was there bitterness? Or
by all means. And I think, as the mind really begins to understand the true nature of what life has presented itself. Again, I take partial responsibility because of the decisions I made. The decisions I made to park myself in my vehicle where I parked it. The inability to not duck down and have the .50 caliber machine gun shoot his engine or shoot him, for crying out loud, or me. That I was partially responsible, but at the same time, the man who blew himself up. And so there was anger, but most of all was true anger at God. See, I was raised as a Christian. I made a decision later on in life to continue to believe in God. And for me, I didn't understand how God could allow something this tragic, this severe, this horrible to happen to me. And that's what's so insane, is that we as American men and women, we're more than happy to give our lives. That means to die for our country. I was more than happy to die for our country, to fight for our freedoms and for our way of life. But there was nowhere in that document, in my mind, that I was willing to go give my eyesight.
Yeah.
Willing to go get partially paralyzed. Like, sorry, that wasn't in the game. And there was anger, resentment, and obviously there was tons of fear. Like, I couldn't even eat. I couldn't even brush my teeth. I'm right-handed, so I had to reteach myself. But I'm like, I can't even take care of myself. How are you going to take care of your wife? How is she going to love you? Why would she love you? Why would she stay with you? These are all thoughts that I think any normal human would go through, because it's a life that I didn't choose to live. It's a life I definitely didn't want to live.
I think you're absolutely right. Any normal human would have those thoughts. How long did those thoughts stay with you? Like, how long is this period of uncertainty and fear and anger last for you?
I surprisingly, it's insane to say, but being a Christian, God is such a forgiving God that it took me to understand that God had a purpose. And I was only in a hospital for probably 4 days, which is an insanely speedy time. But actor Gary Sinise, Lieutenant Dan, I don't know if you watch Forrest Gump.
Big fan of Lieutenant Dan.
There you go. NCIS now. He wanted to say hi. Of course, he's visiting the hospital. I'm feeling like he's only going to come see me. I said, no, I don't want to see him. I don't want his sympathy. Mm-hmm. No. And I'm sure he was shocked, like, why a guy didn't want to see Lieutenant Dan? Like, I said, no. Toby Keith, I heard some good country songs. He was saying, and I said, no, I don't want to see him. Like, I just didn't want to be that typical guy that heroes that we all look up to is going, oh, sorry, we feel for you, thank you. I was a stubborn, arrogant person. And then one day, my wife said, Scotty, a little boy, Andrew Harris, wants to come and say hi to you. And I realized Andrew Harris was a boy I had taught Sunday school to at West Point my junior year. he was in first grade. And I later found out that at the cadet chapel, they apparently announced, Scott Smiley, class of 2003, was very seriously injured and is in Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And they prayed for me. And Andrew at that time looked up to his dad and says, "Dad, I want to go visit Scotty." And his dad was an instructor, professor at West Point. So his dad drove me all the way up. His dad drove him all the way down to Washington, D.C. And as I'm sitting there, partially paralyzed, right side of my body, missing both of my eyes, and oh, by the way, I didn't say this, with the brain swelling, I had a craniotomy, so I was missing a quarter of my skull. They put it into my side to keep it for later. So my life was a disaster. I'm like, why would this kid look up to me? Why would this kid think I'm his hero? And I recall, the quote unquote hero that I was for him at the academy, is that's still who he thinks I am. And I realized that, and it's insane to say how quick it worked, at least I feel God worked in my life, to say, Scotty, you still have a purpose. You can still be Andrew's hero, but you have to let him in the door. If I would have slammed the door or not allowed him in, I don't know, what that would have done to him, but I know what it would have done to me, that I would still be living with anger. I would still be living with resentment. And it's crazy to say, and I have thanked Andrew since then, but I let him in my room and I was just a basket of tears, crying. I looked like an absolute alien. I looked crazy. But it was that boy that enabled me to understand that God had a purpose for me. Though I had no clue what it was, I still couldn't move, I still can't see, but it was that little point that God said he has a plan. And I think the first part of that plan, for any of you that know, is forgiveness. And I had to forgive the man who blew me up, because again, I held him in quite a bit of a responsibility for not being able to see again. Because I knew, again, I didn't want to go to bed thinking of that loser. If I would have shot him first, if I would have got him, my life would be different. I'd be able to see my wife's beautiful face. I'd see my 3 boys, which I've never seen before, watch the rain fall, the snow. That's how I'd feel, and that's how I felt I would live my life. And so that was the first person I had to forgive. I had to forgive myself for decisions I made, being partially responsible. And I know that's not apparent in everyone's life, but for me at the time it was. But most importantly, I had to ask God to forgive me for denying him and to question him. And once that happened, that's when my recovery truly, really began.
It's amazing story of your personal faith, and philosophically, in my opinion, you're a stoic that not only embraces but truly loves whatever happens to you, no matter if it's good or bad.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I was blown up 5 years ago in Afghanistan. I do not share the same capacity for forgiveness that you do. And I'm sure there's somebody in the audience that feels similar to me, as there are those that feel similar to you. But honestly, I'm curious is it possible for people like me to truly recover and thrive without forgiveness?
I think that's a very good question, but I know for me, in how I define living life freely and how I define living life fully, that I can't live life happily and, in my opinion, completely if I didn't forgive. And that doesn't just mean, for me, forgiving the man who blew himself up, but on a daily basis, forgiving someone who wronged me, who jaded me, who asked if I couldn't see when I was trying to find my water.
You're a kind and forbearing man.
Thank you. Is I'm forgiving every day. And I think part of that forgiveness is it enables me to go to bed with a smile on my face, thinking, hey, you lived a full, complete life today. Waking up, thinking of what can I accomplish today? What can I do? How can I love my wife more? How can I love my kids? How can I make a positive change in this world? And I think part of that is due to my ability not to hold resentment, not to, hold animosity and anger towards men and women who have done wrong or done wrong to my wife. It's a little harder to forgive people who've wronged my wife, trust me.
Yeah. She can take care of herself, though.
She's one tough woman. You better believe it.
So you're at Walter Reed, and you have this short stay there, relatively, and then you start this kind of rehabilitation, or like you said, you can't rehabilitate having no eyes, but you start learning to live as a person without sight.
Yep.
Why did you choose to, as I've heard you say, be a terrible blind person and not learn Braille, not use a seeing eye dog, not do a lot of the traditional paths for people that have lost their sight later in life?
Yeah, I think it's unique. Every one of us live our own unique lifestyles, own unique decisions, jobs, opportunities, placements, all make either opportunities or what certain people would say were opportunities. Sometimes they're distractors or impediments for me to do what I want to do and how I want to live life. And for me, it was amazing. I was only in Walter Reed for a little less than 2 months.
Lucky.
No, I know. It's a great place to stay if you like those type of facilities, Dan. I like to move on. So I went to Palo Alto, California.
Thanks a lot.
Went to Palo Alto, California to the Blind Rehabilitation Center. And again, you all have to understand, this is a infantry ranger, United States Military Academy graduate. I went to combat diver qualification course with the year prior to Brian Madden, airborne.
Back when it was hard.
Yeah, you're right.
The last hard class I heard.
Yeah. Mine was.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly.
That. Meanwhile, though, I'm dressed in clothes that were bought secondhand because I came naked on a gurney. I had no clothes. Tiffany didn't bring any of my clothes. They were all packed away in some lockbox in Tacoma, Washington. I felt like a goober. I looked like a goober, but I had a big helmet on my head because I was still missing a quarter of my skull. They did take the portion of my skull out because they wouldn't, the military wouldn't use it because it was a blast injury. But I have a blind stick. I'm wearing a helmet on my head, and it's like, talk about feeling like you're the cool guy on campus. It wasn't me. It wasn't me at all. But in the end, I didn't really care how people looked at me. One, because I couldn't see how they looked at me.
Yeah, there you go.
My wife would beg to differ. But for me, I was intentional about what was in front of me, what my goal was, that I was going to go through Blind Rehabilitation Center to learn how to be more independent, whether it be using my blind stick. I learned Braille, like level 1 Braille, A through Z. I learned how to cook and clean, 2 things I still don't necessarily like doing.
My wife is still waiting for me to learn that.
Oh, yeah, as is mine. Learn how to use public transportation, cross sidewalks, walk around blocks, find homes, walk into buildings, basically live independently. But I think one of the most important things I learned was how to use a computer again. Because I knew, though I was an infantry ranger, no one's ever going to go send me out on that battlefield. I may have gotten lost before. I guarantee I'd be lost every single day now. So for me, I knew where my strengths would lie, and so I learned how to use a computer as my computer now talks to me. So I knew that was one of my strengths, and so I continually focus on it. And less on the Braille, because there's many things in life today that aren't Braille either accessible or they are, but I have like a CNAI device on my iPhone that can scan anything, can read it, can give me colors, can give me how much cash, $1, what it is. It can give me scene preview. If I took a picture, it'd say, open crowd with a lot of beautiful people smiling back at you.
There's no Braille app on the new iPhone?
I don't know. I have the old iPhone.
Oh, gotcha.
But again, Braille is an amazing thing. But for me, after 2 months at Palo Alto, California, I pushed back to Fort Lewis, Washington, as I was going through, I was in the medical hold company, and I continued to learn the computer software, learned to use the stick, got in trouble a few times trying to go to the gym by myself, and my wife later told me she was following me. Made me kind of upset, but you got to have someone's support, some back support. But for me, it was about living life and doing what would best enable me to accomplish. And I think as my story changed, go through the medical evaluation process. That's what any very seriously injured soldier has to go through. We were a little late, and they said, well, hey, you can finish it in Fort Monroe, Virginia. And I was like, huh? And apparently someone high up knew who I was, and within 10 days later, my wife and I moved to Fort Monroe, Virginia, where I worked at the Sessions Command, and again, continued to learn how to live as a blind person, counted the paces, how to get to work, when I needed to cross the street, how many streets I needed to cross. And trust me, many times I did get lost, but I knew on the south side, there's a freeway. And so if I knew the freeways on the right side, you can hear, I knew I was going backwards. So there's just different cues and things that I needed to know and understand. And that again goes like to a seeing eye dog, is like, yeah, I would love one, but I moved every either 15 months to 24 months in the Army. And the second I hit the ground, my job, boom, was 100% to the wall. I had to start. And a dog on average, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, may only know 10 to 15 locations, like memorize, though they can help you a lot in transportation. I do so much on my own, traveling, public speaking, hiking. There's just a lot. I didn't want to put a dog through that. So that's kind of why I'm not a very good blind person.
We won't judge too harshly, but you actually, the story of your wife following you, like that to me is a perfect illustration of somewhat a really humbling loss of independence. And if I stub my toe, I swear and scream and lose my temper and feel sorry for myself. How did you embrace that?
There was no embracing. I wanted to be the independent person that I always thought I was, and I didn't want someone following me, that I felt it was a lead. And this is, again, the relationship that many loving spouses have, is she felt she was doing what's best for me because she thought I was crazy, which I probably was crazy. But at the time, I didn't necessarily see it that way, as I was just going to the gym, which did require me to do constant pace counts, me to memorize how many streets I needed to cross. I mean, this is on a major Fort Lewis, so it was probably lived about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away, so I had to walk, but I felt that's part of the workout. But at the same time, I did get lost in a parking lot, asked some transportation guy, hey, where's the street? He pointed me, thought I was probably a whack job.
Yep.
But again, that's the nature of a relationship, is that I thought she was not trusting me, but in true fashion, she was afraid. Her life, as I shared earlier, blew up into a million pieces. And now she's going to lose her husband, who's being an arrogant pig, trying to walk home on his own when we had a perfectly good vehicle I could just road home in with an air condition. She was doing it out of love, but also feared that she didn't want to now lose her husband because he was a knucklehead trying to walk home. But it's that understanding like, hey, you do require help, you do require assistance, and there are other times that you don't. And when you don't, that doesn't mean you go yell at your wife or yell at your spouse because they did it. You just take in humility and understanding and have a good, nice pillow talk at night of what you'd like to do and how you'd like life to be.
Please don't follow me, honey. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that. Anyway, you talk a lot about adapting to the world versus having or being entitled or expecting the world to adapt to you. And I know you're talking about this is still early in the time frame, but for those that have never served in the military, if you lose your eyesight, you have a free ticket out. You can retire right then and there because if you want to, but you chose to stay. And I'm curious why.
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I felt I still needed to serve, and it's less heroic than I can say now, but I'd only served 2 years of my 5-year duty service. With the military academy graduates, you have to serve 5 years of active duty and 3 years of inactive ready reserve, and I had only served 2 years, so I still wanted to serve. But at the same time, there was still, it's crazy to say, it's kind of what you mentioned earlier, Dan, it's kind of an inner calling in me. It's like, Scotty, you still be able to do something in the military. I don't know what it is, but it may be something. And I think for me, it was kind of dipping my toe into that water to see what possibilities, what opportunities may present themselves. And for me, working at Fort Monroe, it was fun. It was exciting. I traveled to all the basic training soldier bases, AIT, San Antonio, tons of times, to the medical facilities. But at the same time, I knew there was something else for me out there, and I didn't know what it was. And so for me, I had already gone through the medical evaluation board, found 100% disabled, unfit for service. That's the important portion, unfit for service. But there was a caveat of continuation on active duty. And whether or not I fit the true definition was kind of beside the point. It was the men and women around me who saw I'm not in all humility, but saying the work ethic, the fact that I wanted to try, I wanted to push myself, I wanted to do something more. They thought, hey, maybe we could still have him do something. He probably can't deploy again. I was infantry. For some reason, they never gave me a rifle. I know someday I'll find out why. But it was now for me to find a job and a service. And it was crazy again. And any of those who have served in the military, trust me, the military isn't ragging you to say, hey, we think you'd be great at this. Hey, we think you'd be great at this. They'd say,
what?
Yeah. Hey, we have 200 slots. Here's where you're going. But I don't. Here's where you're going. But I don't. Here's where you're going. And likewise for me is they couldn't necessarily do that for me, but I realized, at the academy, there was amazing officers like Andrew Harris's dad who instructed cadets. And I was like, hey, I think I may be able to do that. That would be fun. That'd be exciting. It'd be a challenge. And so I scheduled a meeting with my boss and said, hey, is this something you think I could do? And I didn't really understand ranking at that time, but my boss's boss was a 3-star general, and the dean was a 1-star. So 3 is 2 more than 1. I'm not sure how
Carry
the conversation...
the one denominator.
Yeah.
Math checks out. Yep.
Yeah. But the dean wanted me to be at the academy. So he said, you just got to go get a master's. And I was like, what? So you got to apparently be a little more educated than those you're training or teaching. And so I was able to go to Duke University. And
Never heard of it.
You should watch the NCAA tournament sometime.
Fair enough.
Maybe the Final Four. Not sure it's Mike Krzyzewski's last year. But it was amazing to see how, to continue education. But it goes back to dependence on others. And it kind of, not to say my wife knew what she was doing, but I truly think she did know what she was doing. As I was like, statistics? Who cares? What does that have on me? I took double algebra. I took calculus-based physics. I know math. Well, the instructor said, as you can see here on the board, when you have this equation, you move this here to this side. I'm like, huh? No. And I realized, Scotty, you're going to fail faster than you know what to do with. And I realized, again, I needed help. And again, it was petitioning Duke, the Fuqua School of Business. You can't let me fail. It's your responsibility to help me pass these classes. I don't want anyone to do the work. I just need someone to read PowerPoint slide decks, Excel slide decks. I had to take financial accounting. I was talking to Joe earlier. It's like it's not that fun when you're blind and you just get one cell at a time. It's hard to compare numbers, see references, differences. But again, it's the work ethic, but more importantly, the team that surrounded me and the hours and hours of study that enabled me to finally graduate after 2 years and then return to the military academy and begin teaching students. So,
well, that takes some intestinal fortitude to advocate for yourself. Were you doing that? Was your wife doing that, or did you guys both do it? But you go to an institution like Duke and say, make this right. That takes some cojones.
Yeah, it was hard. We had gotten there early, went to the ADA department at Duke University. So Fuqua School of Business is separated. I mean, it is Duke, but it's separated, so it has its own administration. But I had to go through the ADA process, which is at Duke University, talk to them, introduce myself, got engaged, said what I needed, and they said, Goom, got ya. Showed up 4 days prior to school starting. No one knew what courses they had. No one knew what professors they had. I couldn't talk to anyone. The administration didn't know who I could talk to because they didn't know. It's like all a system-based. And that's when I get into my first class and no one's there to support me. And again, it's less, me stepping up. But one thing, I may have been first blind active duty officer, I didn't want to be the first active duty officer to fail a master's course and have to pay back the Army.
Depending on what year, you might not have been the first. Just saying. I don't know.
That's all right, Dan. So for me, it was more doing what's right. Like I'm always stand up for what's right, doing what's right all the time. Even if it's I come at the short end, hey, what's right is how it should be. And so for me, that's what Duke should have done. That's what they said that they were going to do. And now I was at the short end of the stick. And I think one of the hard things about being in the position that I was in is I received an email from an administrator, and I read the entire email from top to bottom because I don't know what it says. Well, in the forward email, what it also said was one of the dean of Fuqua School of Business basically to all of my professors said, this is his fault. He didn't come prepared. If he fails, it's on him. And I'm like...
We'll share his name publicly in a moment.
No, he no longer works there.
Do you forgive him, Scotty?
Let me tell you the story, Dan.
Oh, sorry.
It's the dean of the school. If I upset him, I'm no longer in this school. My wife wanted... I'll just stop there.
My wife?
I said, there's nothing we can do about it. Just keep doing what we're supposed to do every single day. Work hard, get a tutor, get a mentor, and we're going to prove him wrong. And she goes, but I want to, And it is emotional because it's the love of her life. And I probably opened my mouth too quickly and told her what he said. But it's just a gut-wrenching, this is how they look at my husband, my blind husband, the husband I'm supporting, as an irresponsible person who didn't do what he was supposed to do, when we knew we did everything that we could do and argued to where it not only put a fire in me to forgive Dan, but to do what was right. And that meant to fight for who I am, fight for my cause, fight for the small pittance that the military was paying me to go to Duke. And in the end, I received one of the best tutors who followed me the entire 2 years. And it's funny to say is when that statistics instructor gave me back my first quiz, he goes, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it. I go, did I pass? Like, that's what I was concerned with. And he goes, you not only passed, but you beat the mean. So I did better than half of the class. So for me, thank you.
You're the first person to get applause for passing a math class ever in the history of Mission 43.
I see how high you set the standard, Dan. So for me, it's less, again, I always point out, it's less the work that I did, but it's the work and the team that surrounded me. And in the end, it's introducing myself to instructors. And I remember I was in a real estate entrepreneurial class, and he gives kind of a pop quiz. And so I was like, hey, do you mind helping me, buddy? And he's like, we're not supposed to talk. I was like, well, I can't see, so I'm going to fail the test, so just help me. The instructor's like, please stop talking. So these are master students. I'm like 27, so we're not allowed, at least kids. I was like, don't worry about it. He's talking to someone else. Like, he's staring at us right now. Stop talking. I was like, oh, whatever. I was like, this, and it's like a class of 72 people. So apparently I failed that quiz. Hopefully it wasn't graded. But in the end, the teacher's assistant, who was my classmate, never told him that I was in that class. And I had sent him an email telling him, I'm in that class. Please let him know of my situation. Please let him know there's alternate circumstances or situations in which I need assistance in. It wasn't a math-heavy course, so I didn't need a tutor. Many times the instructors would give me the PowerPoint slide decks before class or after class, so I kind of understood what they were talking about. And so after class, I pulled my stick out, my blind stick out, walked right up to him. I said, hey, Professor such and such, my name. And immediately that teacher's assistant, oh, sorry, I meant to. And I looked at him, was like, you little punk. But in the end, I say that to say there's circumstances. There are things in our lives that happen to us. Is like, do I get mad at the professor? Do I yell, I'm blind, I can't do this on my own? Like, no.
I tried that once in a course in college. It didn't work for me.
As the professor saw you driving by.
That's my bad.
Yeah, I could see it.
I adapt.
I like it. I like it. I like it. But it's more taking it, quote unquote, the high road and saying, hey, I'll figure this out later. If I fail the quiz, then I'm sure the instructor will let me take it later with the appropriate. So it's less looking at people and situations with anger or fear or animosity. It's more taking every situation as a situation, looking at the positive side of it, and seeing how I can still accomplish my goal, still get the mission done.
It's truly amazing. And I mentioned before, we've had conversations about adapting to the world versus the world adapting to you.
Yeah.
Which is it? Which is it for you?
I think it's a both. I do love the federal law that all movies now made have to have audio described. So Netflix, Prime, Hulu are fun for me now. I still love audiobooks though. But at the same time, I am a blind person living in the sighted world. I personally, this is just my personal opinion, I don't believe the blind should bend over backwards for me. While at the same time, I do love the advancements in self-driving cars. There will be a time I'll be able to drive to Boise if there's enough electric plug-ins for my car to plug in.
Don't hold your breath.
And I can get up over Pendleton Pass.
Yep.
So there are advances, but at the same time, I'm a blind person living in the side of the world that, again, I don't look at people to bend over backwards for me. It's do what I can do with what has been put in front of me, and do the best that I can, and try to make a positive change in anyone's life that I'm around. And I mean, that's my personal mission in life.
I've heard you talk about groups that, I don't want to misquote you, but I've heard you say the disabled person petting zoo, like groups that seem to, I don't know,
Yeah.
make victims instead of empowering either veterans or adaptive athletes to do what's necessary.
Yeah.
How have you been able to do that and spread that message that it's not, a petting zoo for groups, both veteran and adaptive athletes, through your work since?
Yeah, I think it's having a broader perspective, and either directly not supporting organizations that, from my opinion, and other people's opinions, professionals' opinions that do that. But I think one of the things, after I was a teacher at the military academy, I was a company commander of the Warrior Transition Unit, which was I was in charge of military sick, ill, and injured. So they could have been injured overseas, literally through a Purple Heart, or injured, broken their leg, broken their arm, shoulders, so on and so forth. But more often than not, there would be veteran, nonprofit organizations that would give me emails directly and say, hey, we want someone with no legs, no spouse can come, no. And I'm like, what is this for? For you just to show that you gave them a free ticket to a Yankees game or a Giants game? I was like, one, I'm not going to share this with my company because it's putting a veteran in a position, again, from my personal opinion, a veteran in a position that this nonprofit organization is just using to potentially get more money for whatever reason. And so for me, it's taking a stance at those times. But at the same time, when there are situations and circumstances, I can say, hey, I think this veteran organization or this nonprofit organization is amazing because they did this, this, this. And I always have the bullet points that follow up why I support that. And if there are organizations that I don't support, I don't talk negatively about them. I just say, hey, I found other organizations that may better fit your preferred, opinion of what you want to support.
Yeah.
So I try to take the higher road. Like I said, I don't like people to feel pity for me, sad for me. Is I'm living my best life now. I'm happy, married, have beautiful children, have great jobs, have amazing friends, to where life is worth living every single day. To wake up with a smile, go to bed with a smile, and it's like, why worry about something I shouldn't worry about?
I don't know. Yeah. You have this amazing aura of positivity you have, and it's inspired tens of thousands of people internationally in your work. The fact is, you have 3 sons that were all born after you lost your sight. There's things you told me once that, you can't play catch with your sons. How do you deal with that and still remain so positive? Like, how do you let that go on a daily basis, or does it even come up for you?
It comes up every day. My boys love basketball. I was a wrestler, so I try to give them basketball advice, and my wife says, Scotty, stop. You have no clue what you're talking about. So I also know kind of where I should be, but I just went to my youngest son's basketball practice, and he's 9 years old, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were there with me, and she's like, oh, he just gave us a thumbs up. He's waving. And so I was like, let me know when he's coming. And so I'd wave and like, yeah, good job. So they know that I'm blind, and it's sad to say, but I don't say it's sad. It's the truth of nature is they all know I've never been able to see. But around 2nd grade, each and every one of them, from the oldest to our youngest, ask, what happened to Dad, Mom and Dad? What happened to Dad? Why did a man blow himself up? How could a man kill himself? Why would a man take my dad's eyes? Because around 2nd grade, their brains and the neurons are connecting, and they're also realizing kind of the cost of decisions that are made and what happens when those decisions are made. And more so, truly realizing that their dad can't see because another man intended harm. And each and every one of them were crying. But in that, they then love me and my wife more completely, to where when I say, hey, let me feel what you got on, they'll come in and let me feel their shirt. Their mom says, hey, come over here, let me see what you have. Go the opposite direction. Maybe that's just how kids love their parents. But with that is I can talk with them, I can read books with them. I have on my phone, read Hank the Cowdog with my youngest son. I read tons of books, so I buy books in print for my older boys. I'm able to talk about them. I go hiking. I have 2 trekking poles, and they carry a cowbell or a bear bell that scares bears away. So there's still so many activities. I go water skiing with them, kind of teach them. I used to be a decent wakeboarder, so teach them kind of the benefits, the costs, though I don't see what they're doing, so I got to have some assistance there. But it's all about just connecting with your children, and that means spending time with them, whether it's waking up in the morning, making them breakfast. I do know how to fry eggs, scrambled eggs, cook bacon, toast, pancakes, make them lunches, but it's just spending time with them and showing how much I love them. And it may mean, hey, I may not be able to catch the ball. I may have a black eye or bloody nose, but they know I can swim with them. I can still do so much, and I just hope that I can continue to be their hero.
You obviously are. The way you talk about, having lost your sight, being a blind man, it just seems like oftentimes you take the most positive things of it. Like, because of this circumstance, you're actually a better father than most because you're more focused on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just enormously impactful for the regulars, the people like me that are slogging through that every day. Will say, you also mentioned, your CAF connection, without saying it exactly, is that all these things that you're doing, they're sport. It's the power of sport. It's the power of being outside and recreating.
Yeah.
And
it's when you wake up in the morning, I was talking with Brian earlier, it's like when you wake up in the morning, you might not want to wake up that early. Yeah, you probably don't want to go to the gym. But the second you get on the treadmill, well, I use a treadmill, I can't run outside unless I have a partner. You hit the weights, you do something, that energy, that endorphins just pours through you. You get in the shower, and then all of a sudden I love coffee, that glass of coffee, it's like you're ready and you're pumped for the day. But it's that endorphins, that healthy lifestyle of living not only for the future, but to live for the future, you have to prepare for the future. You have to live healthy today. And that means walking, running, jogging, swimming, lifting weights, cycling, pedaling, doing things that, activities that many Americans, unfortunately, many around the world don't necessarily do, or at least Americans. But it also enables you to have fun, enjoy life, to take time off. I love hunting. I do hunting. I've killed an elk and a buck, and it's amazing. But it's because of my desire to live a physical, athletic life like challenged athletes in a way that enables me to live life fully and completely. And like I said, go to bed happy.
Do you consider yourself an elite adaptive athlete?
Well, it depends where the mark is, Dan.
Well, I mean, you've completed an Ironman triathlon. You've climbed Mount Denali. You've done one or two things that most human beings, either blind, adaptive, or regular, whatever you want to call it, have not.
I like to look at myself just as a normal person, blind though I may be, trying to do normal things and have fun and live life every day. Doing an Ironman, it was fun, but I know Willie is an testament. You can't, well, maybe Willie could. Most humans just can't go do an Ironman. Like I said, maybe Willie can. It took me over a year of waking up every morning, my wife kicking me out of bed. Aren't you supposed to run this morning? Oh, I don't want to. Cycling hours and hours, swimming hours and hours, that it's getting your body into the shape so that on the day of that Ironman, you can actually cross the finish line. Because trust me, that shepherd's crook was chasing me the entire time. Let's just say, the man, Andy Potts, who finished in 8 hours and 20 minutes, he did it 8 minutes faster than me doubling his time. Think about that. I watched the sun rise and I watched it set. He was asleep by the time it set.
But you did it, and you completed
exactly.
it. What's your proudest athletic achievement since 2005?
It has to be completing the Ironman. And it wasn't, so I'm going to answer that in a two-part answer, I should say. It's finishing that Ironman. It was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in the 43rd state, 107-degree high that day. Largest did not finishes in Ironman history that day. Bike tires were popping. It sounded like shotguns because they filled their tires up to the correct PSI, which meant as the sun heated them and their weight, it expanded and exploded. Bodies were they literally came back, searching the bike path, and they would say, it looks like mayhem out there. People were on the side of the roads. They were pulling bodies off, like literally bodies because they were alive, but they were unconscious, stripping their clothes off to make sure they're naked to expel all the heat. Ran out of ambulances. They were taking people's vehicles to put bodies in the back to take them to the hospital. It was horrible. But at the same time, crossing that finish line, it wasn't just finishing that race, but it was finishing a year journey of working out. And crossing that finish line meant that, I accomplished something that many in life don't. But I think also, and I think more importantly, many in life never even attempt.
Most don't.
And I think that's what was more inspiring to me is that I not only attempted it, but I prepared for it. And though I barely had time to finish it, I crossed that finish line in time. And so I think that was one of the most inspiring athletic moments of my life. No, I was right in front of the last person, but it's because I finished that race. And I think the second most was when I was on Denali. It was just the freedom. I was still on active duty at Gonzaga. I took I think 26 day leave, which is quite a bit of time to take off, but it was the summertime. So all the cadets were at basic camp. And so I had the time, I had the ability, but just that freedom, that it just came to me. It's like, you've done a great job in the military. You've moved 8 different homes, 6 different states. You had 3 kids and one born in each state, each different state. Your wife has loved you, continues to support you, but there's something new in life. There's a new chapter. And I think part of that was not the athletic, but it was just the freedom, smelling the fresh air, just nothing but snow all around, that I had accomplished something in life that I could say I had completed that task and I can move on to something else. And I think for me, it's less of the athletic moment, but it's the fact of the freedom of being on a mountainside, not a person in sight. that was just awe-inspiring and just was an amazing feeling. And that's when I went back home and said, hey, Tiffany, I think I should, potentially medical retire. And she says, well, it's about time.
That's where you made the decision?
So I made a good decision at a good time.
Good decision.
Yep.
Scotty, what can we as Mission 43 and CAF members, what can we do to both embrace or accept our current realities, wherever they may be, and at the same time make a positive influence in our communities like you do?
Yeah, I think it's live life every day like it's your last. Not because it's your not, but it's so that you can live another day with an even better presence, and that you can impact people around your life. It's crazy to see how inspiring being blind on a ski slope and say, holy smokes, that guy just went down that mountain. He can't even see. Do I care? I'm just trying to make it down the mountain alive. But it's more so just doing something that I want to enjoy and living life freely and completely. And so I think as not only Mission 43, but the Challenged Athletes Foundation, is just keep giving back to the community. The relationship that you all have here in Idaho, and I think should spread, especially to the 42nd state next, in Washington, is just be there to support others, but be there with a giving hand, not in a humble hand, not a arrogant, not a egotistical, but in a giving hand. And I think as you do that and you continue to make impacts, disabled, abled, or not, that you stick to giving and loving everyone as we all want to be loved. And I think that impact will change more lives than you all will ever know or ever know you could ever experience.
Scotty, I can't thank you enough for being here, and thank you for being the inspiring and incessantly positive person that you are. And I'm excited to see not only the leadership roles that your wife is going to take, but the constant leadership roles that you will always have in your entire life that inspire people like us. And thank you for being here, Scotty.
Thank you all. Honor. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, man, great job.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.